entitled Transforming Programs to Foster Equity, Access, and Empowerment-Minded Beginning Secondary Mathematics Teachers. And I'm gonna minimize my people. So I can see the screen. And so please mute your mics so that there won't be any extraneous noise. And then also what we would like for you to do is, and if you're not sure which group you would like to join now, we'll put the same slide back up right before we go to the breakout rooms. But we would like for you to rename yourselves by putting a 1 if you would like to attend my breakout room, a 2 for Mels and Block with a focus on the QUIP protocol, and then 3 for Belinda Edwards, who will focus on the PDS context. So the session goal is to address equity issues across the continuum of secondary mathematics teacher education programs, from content coursework through to student teaching clinical residency. And so for our agenda, we'll start out together for about 35 minutes here in the main section. Each presenter will present for about 10 minutes. I'll start with an intro and major connections to equity and clinical experiences at Auburn. And then Lorraine Mills and Scott Block will talk about using the EQUIP protocol. And then Belinda Edwards will talk about helping teacher candidates to develop equitable practices through a PDS-like context. And then after we give our presentations, we will move to breakout rooms. And again, I will share the screen to rename yourselves for which breakout room you would like to attend. And then we will reconvene as a whole group to talk about action steps based on your discussions and our presentations. So this is assumption 1 from AMTE's Standards for Preparing Teachers of Mathematics. And it states, assuring the success of each and every learner requires a deep integrated focus on equity in every program that prepares teachers of mathematics. And that's very important that we think about equity as foregrounding our programs. And so in the Standards for Preparing Teachers of Mathematics, Standard C2, Pedagogical Knowledge and Practices for Teaching Mathematics states, well-prepared beginning teachers of mathematics have foundations in pedagogical knowledge, effective and equitable mathematics teaching practices, and positive and productive dispositions toward teaching mathematics to support students' sense-making, understanding, and reasoning. And then also it has a special focus for C 2.1 to promote equitable teaching. Throughout our programs, we placed a lot of emphasis on the 8 mathematics teaching practices of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, Principles to Action, Ensuring Mathematical Success for All. And then also many of us use the 5 equity-based teaching practices by Aguirre, Mayfield, Ingrams, and Martin. And so in our handouts for our session today, we have a list of both sets of these practices. So when you go to your breakout rooms, if you want to discuss these in a little more detail and how you would use them in your program, you will have these in your handout. If you would just take a moment to write in the chat whether or not you emphasize either the 8 mathematics teaching practices or the 5 equity-based practices in your methods classes and your work with both pre-service teachers and in-service teachers. Just take a moment to write in the chat if you use those. So it seems like a lot of people use both in methods course. Some people use the 8 mathematics teaching practices. So hopefully we've introduced you to something new today as well. Okay. So the next standard from the standards for preparing teachers of mathematics that we will emphasize today is standard C4, social context of mathematics teaching and learning. Well-prepared beginning teachers of mathematics realize that the social, historical, and institutional context of mathematics affects teaching and learning and know about and are committed to their critical role as advocates for each and every student. And the indicators are provide access and advancement is really important for students to have access to meaningful mathematics so that they're able to move toward upper level mathematics and also to have options when they graduate of whether or not they want to seek a 4-year degree, go into technical school or other career choices. Also cultivate positive mathematical identities, draw on students' mathematical strengths, understand power and privilege in the history of mathematics education, and then enact ethical practice for advocacy. We want all of our teacher candidates, when they leave our program, to be well-prepared beginning teachers with a socio-political mindset and a focus on ensuring that each and every one of their students are successful in their classroom. So what I want to talk about today is Auburn's clinical residency and the management seminar. During our clinical residency, our students participate in a management seminar that meets once a week, each week during the internship experience or clinical residency, unless during the peak time of the clinical residency, they take a week or two off so that they can just focus on what they are doing in the classroom. But for the most part, the management seminar really helps to emphasize the things that they are learning while they are participating in their clinical residency. And it also helps to reinforce things that they've learned throughout their methods course. Throughout our methods courses, we've placed a large emphasis on equity, access, and empowerment. And so the clinical residency is just an extension of that. So during the management course, we talk about equity issues all throughout the course. We talk about examples of equity and examples of equity things that they see happening in the classrooms, as well as inequitable things. And then sometimes during the management seminar, we'll bring out different vignettes to help them think about possible situations that might be happening in their placements or in their schools. One of the vignettes that we use is from the standards for preparing teachers of mathematics. And it is the providing vignette 7.2, providing opportunities to learn. In this vignette, Russo and Tate talk about how some students are in the classroom and throughout most of the class period, the teacher does not interact with the students. And one of the students is trying to get help from another student, but the teacher discourages the other student from actually helping the student that needs help. Another student leaves the classroom and is gone for most of the period. And so what this vignette points out is some of the inequities that exist in classrooms and the importance of our students not allowing those inequities to take place. Oftentimes when I'm observing students, I'll ask, why is someone sitting in a table alone and not interacting with the other students? I won't ask that question out loud. I'll usually ask the mentor teacher privately what's happening. And then once the lesson is over, I discuss it with the the teacher candidates. And sometimes I'll even encourage them to go back to the student that's sitting alone and engage them more in the lesson if I have an opportunity to do it in a manner that's not obtrusive. But our goal is to help our teacher candidates to know that each and every student deserves a meaningful mathematics education. And so it's not fair to the students for them to go through periods of instruction without being engaged and without having learning take place. Also, teacher candidates during the clinical residency, teacher candidates follow a student around for a day. We adopted this assignment from an article from the Washington Post entitled A Teacher spends 2 days as a student and is shocked at what she learns. And our students really learn a lot from following a student around for a day. They learn whether or not their students are actively engaged in instruction throughout the day. They learn how they interact with other students. They learn what kind of questions the students are being asked in other classes. And then it also sometimes and most of the time it motivates them to ensure that the students are actively engaged in their classrooms. And the next vignette that I highlight is vignette 7.4, a student teacher's revelation related to emergent multilingual students. And this is also in the standards for preparing teachers of mathematics. In this vignette, a student teacher or teacher candidate is faced with 3 students in her classroom who are from Guatemala and they do not speak English. And she has the opportunity to really learn how to meet their needs as well as the rest of the students' needs in the classroom. And she actually followed the Guatemalan students around for a day and found that most of the time they were not engaged in learning, that they were barely even spoken to throughout the day except for in their Spanish class. And so she gathered from that she really needed to work with them in the math class, and that she needed to not only translate what was going on in the classroom, but she also needed to ensure that they were learning mathematics. And she talks about all of the things that she experienced with those students, the different revelations that came about throughout that class. Another thing that we have our students do is choose a special needs student to focus on throughout the semester. This student does not have to have a learning disability or a physical disability. This student could just be a student that is not focused on learning during the class, and the teacher candidate chooses that student and tries to move the student forward throughout the semester. Teacher candidates constantly reflect on implementing the math teaching practices and other equitable practices throughout the semester. And then by the end of the semester, they are really able to talk about whether or not they know learning is taking place, whether or not students are actively engaged in learning. And they also are able to talk about equitable and inequitable situations well, and what they can do to mitigate those situations. Some teacher candidates are in pairs, which enables them and their teacher to create a professional learning community focused on student learning. We find that doing pair placements throughout the clinical residency really helps our students to grow. And then then finally, another thing that I'll share, and these aren't the only things that we do related to equity, I just highlighted a few of them. Teacher candidates reflect on policies and other factors that impact students' opportunities to learn. Like they look at how some of their classes might have 30 students and others might only have 15, and they're all in the same grade level. So why aren't students more evenly spread out throughout the periods of the day? And then they also notice the makeup of some classes within the schools, who's taking the higher level mathematics classes and who's relegated to lower level classes. And so it's really important to talk about all of these issues and how they impact students, how they impact students' mathematics identities, and then also how our teacher candidates can serve as advocates for their students. So if you want to learn more about what we do, come to my breakout session. So now we have Lorraine Mills and Scott Block.
Thank you, Marilyn. So this slide, just to revisit, Marilyn already brought this slide up. The AMTE assumption number 1, and I know for myself as a teacher educator, trying to address equity in a deep and integrated way can be difficult. And so also very daunting if you're unsure how to get started. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Equip app and how we've been using it and how you can use that to support your prospective teachers in making connections to many of the AMT standards, but particularly to the ones that Marilyn has already highlighted. So C21, promote equitable teaching, and then also a little bit in terms of C4, but primarily we've been using this around C21. So Scott and I have been working with our pre-service teachers, and what we've decided to focus on is classroom discourse as a way to do this work. And so what we've been doing is we've been using the Equip app. So the Equip is the Equity Quantified in Participation app, and it's a classroom observation tool. It's designed by Nirul Shah and Dan Reinhold. And according to the authors, the tool focuses on relatively low inference dimensions of classroom discourse, which are then cross-tabulated with demographic markers, such as gender and race, to identify patterns of more and less equitable participation within and across lessons. And there's 2 citations there. One will take you right to the Equip app, which we're going to show you a little bit of, and then one is a JRME article that talks a little bit more about that. So yep, next slide. So
Okay.
What the Equip app, you're doing great, it's perfect. What the Equip app allows anyone to do is to create a classroom and a student roster. You can customize the social markers and aspects of classroom discourse that you want to track. Then you can observe lessons and use the Equip to track what you see and hear. And then finally, what you can do is you can use the Equip to analyze trends in the data. So next slide. So as I said, they talk about these discourse dimensions as relatively low inference dimensions. So things like the types of questions teachers ask, responses provided by students, things like wait time or solicitation methods, length of student talk. And then these are cross-tabulated with social markers, or right now in the tool itself in the app, it actually uses the term demographics, such as things like gender and race, but these are fully customizable. And so what's nice about this is that as a student, a prospective teacher, you could go in and you could decide what is it that you really want to pay attention to. All of those discourse dimensions, you could create whatever you want. You can create whatever social markers you want. Right now, there's not a way for, say, a teacher educator to create their own defaults and push that out to, say, your pre-service teachers, but you can have really interesting conversations around how they might set these up in for their own observations. So the power of the tool is really that once it's set up, you can use this to collect data in an observation. And so you can do this in real time, or you can do this by watching video, which is what we had our pre-service teachers do. And what the app does is it allows the user through the analysis portion to look at trends across the discourse dimensions and the social markers. So the next slide will show a couple of things. One, on the left, you'll see the different sort of views that you can choose to do your analysis. And then what the right is a little bit of a video to show you what it looks like when a student goes in to analyze data. So it might be a little bit hard to see, but rather than taking people to the website, I thought this would give you a little bit of a sense of sort of the power of the tool. So you could choose a number of different observations, you can change the demographics, and you can change the discourse markers. And so you could see how many females are you calling on, how many Black students are you calling, how many English learners are you calling on, how long is their talk, how much wait time are you giving. And then another really interesting part of the tool is that you can click on the equity ratio. And so what the equity ratio is it's analytics that provide the actual participation that you're getting versus what should be expected. So if 50% of your students are Black, you should have about 50% of your contributions coming from your Black students. And so it allows pre-service teachers to look at what's actually happening in their classroom with respect to their participation. So what did we do with this? Scott's going to take over and talk a little bit about what we did.
Yeah, so we engaged our PSTs in using the equip in a PDSA cycle format. The first thing we did was we asked them to generate a question to examine with respect to the opportunities that they provide for equitable participation in their practicum classrooms. They then collected at least 20 minutes of classroom instruction data that would allow them to explore their question using the equip tool. They used the analysis feature of the app to explore trends in their data related to their questions. They shared this data and initial analysis and received feedback from 2 to 3 other PST colleagues in a PLC. And finally, they submitted a reflection that used their analysis and what they learned from their PLC to describe trends and the opportunities they provided for participation and generated action steps for improving the opportunities that they provide for equitable participation in their classroom. They did this cycle twice throughout the semester, and their first reflection was in October and their second was in December in their professional learning community that we did during methods class. Okay, next slide. So as the PSTs thought about equitable participation, one in particular wanted to explore who they were calling on with regards to gender. This PST noticed that they called on males more than females and that there was a large group of students who did not participate because they were not called on. They developed action steps to call on students more evenly in terms of race and gender, as well as to call on students who do not typically participate as much as others do. Another PST looked at their general tendencies with who they called on and noticed that they called on the same 8 to 9 students every single time, noticing that this was likely due to impatience and not necessarily being comfortable with wait time. Action steps that this PST sought were to have better equity in their class with participation from all members by integrating activities for students to work with their peers in order that for them to have the opportunity to communicate mathematics with someone, even if it wasn't them, the teacher, and to seek out quieter students ahead of time to prepare them to share their work with the class in order to get them involved in a safe and positive way. Next slide. Benefits that the pre-service teachers mentioned after working with the equip tool spanned across their noticing patterns of equitable participation, the equip tool itself, and other general benefits. They noticed areas of their practice that they wanted to improve, how their teaching style can affect the questions students ask, and how differences exist within categories of race and gender. They also mentioned the usefulness of the equip tool, specifically how it helped them track data, which they could use to help improve their practices. And finally, they mentioned benefits related to reflecting on their teaching practices, doing this both individually and collaboratively in their PLCs. Next slide. In addition to the benefits that the PSTs mentioned, they also talked about some challenges related to setting up and using the equip tool, designing their study, and collecting data. They mentioned having difficulty earlier in the process, familiarizing themselves with using the equip tool. They also had challenges thinking about what equity actually meant in connecting data with the questions that they wanted to explore, as well as other issues related to data collection. And I believe that's it. So if you want to hear more about the equip tool, feel free to join Lorraine and I's breakout room.
Okay, thank you both. Next, we have Belinda Edwards, talking about helping teacher candidates to develop equitable practices through a PDS-like context.
Thank you, Marilyn. So I'm going to be sharing with you what we're doing at KSU to help our teacher candidates to develop equitable practice. And these are the standards that I'll be addressing. So next slide, please. So like many teacher prep programs across the country, we were challenged with bridging the gap between what we were doing in our methods coursework, and the clinical field experience. Next slide. So to address that challenge, we looked carefully at developing a partnership with a local high school. And the local high school that we developed the partnership with, it's a high need school, in urban environment, 95% Black and brown students. Next slide. And it was really important for us to have a bi-directional relationship with our partner school that reflects a common vision and a commitment to preparing effective teachers, but also we wanted to focus on supporting student learning in that school, students and also teachers in the school as well. So for us, the partnership provided teacher candidates who are mostly white teacher candidates. In fact, probably 95% of our students who come through our program are white. So we wanted to provide teacher candidates an urban environment to examine teaching and learning. And also we wanted to provide an environment where our teacher candidates could become comfortable with their new roles of being a teacher in an urban environment. So many of our students were unfamiliar with the urban teaching environment, particularly when it's a predominantly Black and brown environment. So we wanted to expose our teacher candidates to that environment. So what are we actually doing at KSU? What's the structure? So in our junior year, we have 2 methods courses, one in the fall, one in the spring. And the methods course is actually taught on site at the local school for 1 day per week. And the teacher candidates are paired with the mathematics teacher for 1 block. So with the methods course, it's actually paired with the field experience, 60-hour field experience. And the teacher candidates are paired with the math teacher for 1 block. And they are also placed with an AVID teacher, AVID tutoring for 1 block. They do this for 1 day a week for 4 hours. So in combination, we have the methods course, the math classroom, and the AVID tutoring that our teacher candidates experience. Next slide. Next. So in the methods course, we have several activities that help to connect that field experience to what the students are learning in the classroom. And in the breakout groups, I can share the link to these assignments if you want to have a look at them. But there's an autoethnography assignment that addresses identity development. There's an assignment that's called listening to student stories. And this particular assignment helps our students to build relationships with real students and to help affirm their identities. We also learn about instructional routines. We rehearse them. Go ahead and click next so that I can and then next again. Thank you. So the rehearsal and instructional routines, this is the way that we actually connect to the mathematics classroom and what the students what our teacher candidates will be doing in the mathematics classroom, how they will be working with the mentor teacher. So in the methods class, we run through a cycle of learning where the teacher candidate learns about the instructional routine, what it is. They plan an instructional routine, they plan to implement it. In that planning, they work with their mentor teacher in the classroom. They actually implement the instructional routine with students in the classroom, and then we come back and we talk about how it went. So they reflect on the implementation of the instructional routine. We also focus on the mathematical teaching practices and the equitable teaching practices. And together, that framework, those frameworks, they work together to kind of create this classroom learning environment that's supportive of equitable teaching practices. Next. Some of the benefits of the partnership structure. Again, it provides opportunities for our teacher candidates to notice issues of equity. The school is a high needs school. So they notice issues of equity, and we talk about those issues of equity in the mathematics classroom. We talk about how to reject deficit ideology, or if they're having that kind of deficit views of students, we have an opportunity to talk about that and how harmful it is. And also having our students work in that high need environment, I think it reduces a lot of fears and concerns they have about teaching in a high need school. Next. And here are some informal results from teacher candidate reflections at the end of the methods course. So I'll give you an opportunity just to read some of these. I think one of the most important things here is students they have less fear, that's number one, of being in that environment. I think it addresses a lot of the stereotypes that they have about families and students who attend high need schools. They definitely notice inequities. We can immediately talk about those inequities. And also it helps in their development of a teacher identity as well. Next. Here are some other impacts. I'll give you an opportunity to read those. I think an important impact here is that the math teacher educators, we really have an opportunity to and some control over our clinical experience placements and who our students are placed with, who they're working with as mentor teachers in the classroom. And I think that it improves also the instruction in that local school, because our teacher candidates, oftentimes when they're planning their instructional routines, this is new to a lot of the mentor teachers. So they have an opportunity to collaborate in planning something that many of the mentor teachers are not familiar with. Next. And here are some recommendations for others who might be interested in establishing a partnership with a local school. I think number one, you should reach out to the school administrators to get a better idea of what their needs are. And that goes back to, it was really important for us to establish a relationship that was bidirectional. And I think that begins with reaching out to the school administrators to see what their needs are. We can talk more about this in the breakout sessions. If you're interested, I can go in greater detail in terms of recommendations and what we're actually doing to bridge those connections between the math coursework, math methods coursework, and what's happening in the field experience.
Okay. And these are Belinda's references, and this is her email address. Okay, so if we'd like for you to, I guess I can copy these questions and put them in the chat for you when you go to your breakout rooms. I have to escape. Or you can take a picture. Let me see.
I think we might need this slide again with the room numbers. So we still
Yeah.
have quite a few people to
I'll put
rename.
that back up in a second. Let me see. So I'm just putting the slide with the questions on it in the, uh-oh. I guess I didn't copy it. It's still not copying. Anyway, I'll fix that and send it to you somehow. So we need to slide back up with the thank you, Stephanie. Here's the slide for you to rename where you would like to go. And then Stephanie will place you in the breakout rooms. And once you're in the breakout rooms, I'll put the slide with the questions on it in the chat.
And I have the questions, Marilyn. I could just put it in so that you don't have to worry about it.
Oh, okay. You already did it?
Yeah, I have them. I can just copy them in when we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have just about everybody ready to go. So I'll go ahead and open the rooms and we can get anyone who's left sorted. Did we need to adjust our timing since we're running a little bit long?
So we can come back at about 2:25.
Okay, so keep with the 15.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, we'll go ahead and open those rooms.
All right. In the chat, one action step that you might take as a result of your participating today. So it's like, I missed a lot of the discussion that was going on before you went to the breaks. So one person said, we'll learn more about EQUIP, using AMTE vignettes during clinical residency and using EQUIP tool and methods course. Learning more about instructional routines. Think about using the EQUIP to replace older tool I use in my methods course. Think about messages in methods classrooms. Okay. So thank you all for your participation today. And Gary has some slides that he would like to share.
Very quick. You have them, don't you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
forgot I wasn't sharing my screen.
Okay. So if you've been paying attention, you know we have now announced a virtual pre-conference to the virtual AMTE conference. So we'll be meeting the Thursday afternoon before AMTE starts. And this is really designed for people who are highly engaged in MTEP 2.0, such as yourself, as well as others who just want to learn more. So please encourage people to be a part of this. There isn't a fee, but we are asking people to register. Okay, the next slide is the exciting one. If you want to attend the AMTE virtual the AMTE virtual conference, if you're coming to the MTEP virtual pre-conference and have been active in MTEP 2.0, you can request registration. So we've had a few requests, but if you're interested, the deadline is November 11th, because after that, the fees go up. So if you're interested, please do it now. It's at the end of the registration form for the pre-conference. And the last slide is our next NIC Cast, which is coming up on Wednesday, December 2nd. And this is, we're calling it a celebration of successes. So, we're just really excited at all the teams that have joined MTEP 2.0 and are doing fabulous work. And what we're thinking is come prepared to share some success. It may be a big one, or it may be, the small victories are important too. And so we'll just encourage you to maybe come up with a little meme or picture or saying or something that you can share with the group. So we have a fun activity set up with that, and we think you'll really enjoy hearing what other people are doing and learning from each other. And so hope to see you then. Keep in touch if you have questions or any concerns. You know where to find us.
Thank you all again for joining our NIC Cast today. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.